farmer was leading the horse through the snow-covered forest, turning his eyes away each time she lifted her head and looked at him. Luna was an old, light gray mare, once beautiful, now simply old, and she had long stopped being useful on the farm. She followed her owner obediently, the way she had all her life, not even guessing where he was taking her. He could not bring himself to shoot her, so he chose this instead. At a large pine tree on the edge of a clearing, the farmer stopped. He wrapped the rope around the trunk several times and pulled the knot tight. For one more second, he kept his hand on the rope without moving. Then he pulled it away sharply, whistled to the dog, and walked toward the pickup truck without turning back to look at the horse even once. Rex, a black Doberman, jumped into the back of the truck in one smooth, familiar motion. The pickup started moving, its wheels crunching over the frozen crust of snow. The dog stood in the truck bed and looked back over the tailgate, toward the pine tree where the horse was left standing, tied and unable to move. He looked forward at the back of his owner's head through the rear window of the cab. Then he looked back again at Luna, who watched them leave and could not step away. The truck picked up speed, and the distance between them grew. Suddenly, Rex ran across the truck bed and jumped. He hit the snow on his side, rolled over his shoulder, got back on his paws, and ran toward the horse. The farmer did not see it. The red lights of the pickup disappeared behind the trees, and the forest became quiet again. Only the snow kept falling between the trunks, small flakes, thick and slow. Rex ran up to Luna and immediately grabbed the rope on the trunk with his teeth. He pulled with all his strength, shaking his head from side to side, pressing all four paws into the frozen ground. The rope was thick, swollen from the snow, and would not give at all. Luna pulled in the opposite direction, stretching her neck. They both pulled at the same time, but the rope held tight. The dog kept chewing it for several more minutes until his gums began to bleed. Then he sat down in the snow beside the horse and froze in place. The frost grew stronger with every hour. Luna shifted from one leg to another and trembled more and more, her large body shaking in a way that could be seen even from far away. Rex stood up and began walking around the edge of the clearing, sniffing the snow and the tree trunks. Soon, he found a wooden hunting feeder nailed to a trunk between two old fir trees. Inside were the remains of last year's hay. Not much, but still something. The feeder hung high, and Rex jumped several times before he managed to grab a mouthful and pull it down. Luna watched him without moving. The dog dragged the hay to her, dropped it at her feet, went back, and jumped again. Luna lowered her head and began to eat, slowly and carefully, but she was eating. Rex made several more trips to the feeder until it was completely empty. Then he sat down beside the horse again and leaned against her leg. The snow did not stop falling, and the prints of his paws between the feeder and the pine tree faded before the eyes, disappearing one by one under the fresh layer. A wolf appeared suddenly. He stepped out from behind the trees at the edge of the clearing and stopped, looking at the horse. He was a large gray male, thin after a long winter with hollow sides and yellow eyes. He took several careful steps forward, lowering his head and sniffing the snow. Rex rushed at him without making a single sound, crouching low to the ground and gaining speed with each jump. The wolf stepped back, but he did not run away. He turned sideways, raised his fur, and showed his teeth. At that moment, Luna struck the frozen ground hard with her front hoof. The sound echoed loudly between the trees. The wolf looked at the horse, then at the Doberman, who stood between him and the horse without moving. For several seconds, they stared at each other. Then the wolf turned around and disappeared into the forest. But he did not go far. Rex could see his shape at the edge of the clearing, a gray shadow between the trunks, still and patient. The wolf sat there and waited. Rex stood facing the forest and did not move either. Behind him, Luna stopped eating and raised her head. They remained like that for several long minutes until the gray shadow finally stood up, stretched, and slowly faded into the darkness between the trees. Night came quickly. The darkness between the tree trunks grew thick and became impossible to see through, and the frost grew even stronger. Rex pressed himself tightly against Luna's side and lay down right in the snow, burying his nose in her thick fur. The horse stood over him without moving. Her wide, warm body protected the dog from the wind on every side. That is how they spent the night. The horse standing, the dog curled up at her legs, both of them keeping each other warm in the dark winter forest. By morning, it was clear they could not last like this much longer. Luna could barely shift her legs. Her breathing became heavy and fast, and her sides looked more sunken than the day before. The hay in the feeder had long been gone. The frost did not ease. It was even colder than during the night. Rex stood beside the horse for a few seconds, then turned and ran toward the road. The first person he saw was a woman who was just getting out of her car, holding a small child in her arms. Rex ran up to her. The woman quickly stepped back, held the child tighter against her chest, and hurried to lock the car door. The dog walked around the car looking into the window, then ran on. Farther down the road, an elderly man stood beside his car, looking under the hood. Rex ran up to him, but when the man saw the Doberman, he quickly closed the hood, got into the car, and shut the door. The dog scratched at the window with his paw. The man shook his head and started the engine. Rex ran on. A little farther along the roadside stood a group of teenagers. They noticed the Doberman at once and began shouting. One started yelling and throwing snowballs. Another pulled out his phone and began filming, and a third raised a stick as if to strike. Rex dodged the snowballs without even stopping. Every second mattered. He ran out onto the main road right in front of a Jeep. The driver slammed on the brakes. The vehicle slid sideways across the packed ice and stopped about 2 feet from the dog, barely missing him with the bumper. The man behind the wheel stared at the Doberman standing in the middle of the road for several seconds. Rex turned around and ran back into the forest, constantly looking over his shoulder. The man waited a moment, then slowly drove after him, as if he understood that the dog needed help. The Jeep forced its way between the trees across deep snow. The engine roared in low gear, and branches scraped along the roof and sides. Rex ran ahead, sometimes slowing down and looking back. The vehicle followed. They were almost at the pine tree. The light open space of the clearing could already be seen ahead. Then the front wheels of the Jeep suddenly sank into a hole hidden under the snow. The vehicle dipped forward and got stuck on its belly. The man pressed the gas pedal several times. The wheels spun uselessly and only dug deeper. He got out, walked around the Jeep, and took out his phone. There was no signal. He looked toward the forest, then up at the sky. The snowfall was growing heavier. He spread his hands in frustration and climbed back behind the wheel. Rex stood and watched as the Jeep slowly backed away between the trees and crawled back toward the road. When the sound of the engine finally faded, the dog turned and ran back to the horse. When he reached the pine tree, the place was empty. Luna was gone. All that remained was the rope hanging from the trunk, torn, with wet frayed ends swaying in the wind. There were no signs of struggle around, no blood on the snow, not a single piece of hair caught on the branches. The snow kept falling, wiping everything away without a trace. Rex ran around the clearing again and again, pushing his nose into the snow, catching a scent and losing it after only a few steps, as if Luna had simply disappeared into the air. The dog whimpered, sniffed the air, and ran in circles once more. At last he lay down on the spot where Luna had stood before, curled into a ball, and went still. By night, the frost grew harsher. Ice formed on his back, then on his sides, then